It seems that we've got a wide demographic of attendees. Seems from
Yeah,
many
so
continents. It's great.
yeah, and so people from China, even Pakistan, India, Southeast Asia. But some might miss the first prize I mentioned, and people sometimes getting late.
Yeah.
Hopefully we could record everything. Yeah, I can start to introduce.
Okay.
Yeah, so good afternoon to the people from Asia, and good morning to people from Europe. My name is Jie Chu. I'm the marketing manager of Tuya. Actually, I'm in charge of Asia Pacific market. And today we have Julian from Futuresource to give us a speech about smart home. Let's welcome him to give a brief introduction about himself and his company and the speech we are going to talk about today.
Chu, thank you very much. It's a pleasure. Always love talking about smart home, which is just a fascinating industry, as I'm sure we're all aware of being involved in it. So just a little bit about myself. So I'm Julian, and I've been working for Futuresource for the past year. I've been leading the smart home and vision department, specializing in a number of different product segments, which I'll be talking about in a second. And it's been a super interesting year, as I'm sure we're all very aware of, unprecedented. The smart home industry has remained pretty robust, as it remains pretty strong throughout this year. And it's been super interesting finding out more and more about this industry. So previously I spent 3 years working for a company called Global Business Reports, and I spent time on the ground working in 6 continents. So all the way from the west coast of the US to Singapore, India, Australia, really trying to find out what makes certain industry value chains tick. So everything from smart tech to biotech to industrial tech, and had the opportunity to speak to market leaders and really understand where these industries were going. So Futuresource itself, if you haven't heard of us, we are a boutique research and strategy consultancy based in the outskirts of London in the UK. And we specialize in a number of different industries. So everything from consumer electronics to ed tech to media entertainment. And we have heritage stretching back to the 1980s. And our product portfolio, we do everything from custom consulting projects with some of the big tech companies to having a subscription service model and pricing and tracking as well. But we basically do anything from our client, from research, strategy, and analysis. And we work from the west coast of the US all the way to the Far East. So we have clients across the world. So I think it's good if we just jump in and I'll just give a bit of introduction to what I'm going to be talking about. So I'm going to be focusing mainly on. Oh, sorry, 1 second. My computer's decided to switch off. You can see me now. So I will be. Sorry. Bear with me 1 second. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, we're just having a bit of technical issues with my laptop. It just keeps on freezing. So we're going to be mainly focusing on what's going on in the smart home industry at the moment, how it's evolving in the coming years, how it's been impacted by the global pandemic this year, and what are the key barriers to entry for a number of the consumers. And then I'll be finishing off with looking at the trajectory of the industry in the coming years, what sorts of technologies are going to come about, and who potentially is going to be grabbing those low-hanging fruits, and how can you position yourselves to be grabbing those low-hanging fruits. I'll be looking to possibly answer some questions at the end, but if we don't have time, please send me an email, a LinkedIn message, or just write on the YouTube link, which Chu will be putting up just after. So first of all, just a big overview of the smart home industry. I'm sure most of you that have logged in today have a good grasp of this industry and all the players that make it up. But first of all, we've got the custom home automation specialists. So the big names are Control4 and Crestron, which we're all very familiar with. And they've seen their year-on-year sales grow pretty incrementally over the past couple of years. But they have been quite impacted by the global pandemic this year. And that's mainly because custom installers have been hesitant to go to consumers' homes during stringent lockdown measures. Then we have the appliance and system suppliers. So the big home appliance manufacturers. In China, of course, we've got Haier and Midea. And they've been moving slowly into the smart home industry by moving into adjacent product segments, but by also making their dumb appliances smarter. So at FutureSource, we also look at the appliance and smart appliance market, and we've seen smart appliances notice an uptick from being just 10% of the appliance industry. This will go up to 17% by next year. So quite a big uptick. It's exponential growth in it. And then you have the third-party service providers. So when we're thinking about these sorts of companies, we're thinking of utilities, telecommunications. The big every country has a big telco. In the UK, we have O2, Vodafone. In the US, Xfinity, and they're increasingly moving into the smart home by adding a smart home offering to their wider package. And they're able to do this much easier than other companies because they have a tight bundling model already in place. And examples of this in recent years has been Xfinity's home security package in the US, and then Vodafone's vHome package in Europe. And then the final, but probably the most important segment that I'm going to be talking about today is the product vendors, and that's mainly the DIY market. So that's the fastest growing segment within the smart home, and it's where we see a number of the key smart home market leaders now. We've got Google Nest, Samsung Arlo, August. They lead their respective smart security segments. Now, looking at the smart home industry as a whole in 2020, and focusing really on the DIY product segment. So the smart home market is one of the fastest growing across consumer electronics. So 170 million smart home devices are expected to be sold in 2020, and that's across the 5 product categories of security and monitoring, lighting, power, climate control, and hubs. And then the compound annual growth rate of this market from 2020 to 2024 is 24%. That's pretty staggering if you compare it to some other industries. And as you can see, the security and monitoring industry takes up a huge segment of this. So 59% of sales across these categories will be from security and monitoring in 2020. This is shipments. Value is even higher. It's closer to 70%. And by 2024, shipments for security and monitoring will still make up at least half of the smart home industry. So looking at one of the key trends that we've seen in smart home in recent years, and something that we're likely to see moving forward, has been vendors going from simply just selling the hardware to their consumers to moving to incorporate a smart home as a service business model by offering a bolt-on subscription service, which usually involves a recurring monthly payment for their customers. This has been particularly prevalent in security monitoring, and especially in doorbells and cameras. And as you can see, those are the 2 main product segments that we see across security. So we've seen companies like Arlo, Google Nest, Canary target this space by bolting on a range of services, including cloud storage, advanced scene recognition, facial recognition technology, and unlimited video downloads through a freemium business model. So it usually involves pay nothing, get a few services. It might be a certain amount of filming time, and then for additional services you pay a small amount, so maybe $2.99 in the US. And then the value of this model, so going from a hardware model to a smart home as a service model, or smart security as a service model, as we call it as well, the value for the vendor is really comprehensive. So consistent revenue, one of them, increased engagement with the consumer, as well as greater flow of consumer data. So really understanding what your consumers want, and then positioning yourselves in that way. To say, a really important point to say is that a number of companies have also tried to add this freemium business model, add a recurring monthly model, and it has failed. It's really important to say that there must be value and added value to the offering if you're thinking about adding a model like this. You can't simply just say, oh, we're just going to charge our consumers an extra $2.99 on the package that we're already giving them. So that's a really important thing to say. Now looking at the wider market, so smart security monitoring sales in 2020 specifically. So as was said, 59% of all smart home device sales will come from this segment this year. So it's the most prevalent in the market. And the big market, one of the market leaders pretty much for most consumer electronics is North America. So 52% of sales we expect to come from North America this year in smart security and monitoring. The second biggest market, and the market that I'm going to be focusing on quite a lot today as we speak to Tuya in China is APAC, and specifically China. So China this year will represent almost a quarter of global sales in 2020. The growth of China's consumer electronics market is just absolutely staggering, and it's starting to look less of a hockey curve up, but there are other regions around China across APAC that are still seeing that exponential growth as well. And one of the reasons why China has had such a fruitful growth in its smart home industry, and especially in smart security, has been the boom of IP security cameras. And that's because they sell very cheaply in the market. So several Chinese manufacturers, as I'm sure a number of you know, sell them very cheaply and make them very accessible and affordable. So the average selling price of these devices was well below $30 in 2020. And China itself, it's going through the steps it needs to go through to become a powerhouse in the smart home industry. One of the ways it's done that has been by recently the government is putting forward a working group to strengthen its standardization process across smart home industry. We're seeing this happen a lot in the US with the Zigbee Alliance, Z-Wave, etc., with the Open Connectivity Foundation, who I was fortunate enough to do a webinar with a few months back. But it's great to see this happening in China as well through the MIIT Smart Home Standard Working Team, and they're putting forward a number of things to push forward the smart home industry, including standardizing processes across the smart home industry. And they're focusing on construction and maintenance of a comprehensive standardization system. They're formulating key technical standards for the smart home industry. They are promoting the interconnection of smart home products and the sample application and industrialization of devices as well. So a lot of things are happening. Again, just going back to China. So we're seeing from both manufacturing and a consumer perspective, a thirst for a lot of these products that's been driven by the affordability of these products and the accessibility. And the market actually has a higher penetration rate now than a lot of other countries, despite the population of 1.4 billion. We're seeing penetration because in general, smart home penetration is pretty low across a lot of different markets, especially across LATAM, Africa, and the rest of APAC as well. So as the China market becomes more saturated, we do expect a lot of Chinese manufacturers to look towards APAC, and that's definitely happening already. The market is relatively untapped still, so we're expecting the security and monitoring market across APAC to witness a 31.1% compound annual growth rate from 2020 to 2024. So a lot of opportunities within this market as well. And just before I leave China, I think it's important to say that no market has been unimpacted by the global pandemic this year. The Chinese manufacturing and supply chain segment of the smart home industry was severely impacted in Q1 as the vast swathes of the country went into lockdown, but we have seen a big bounce back since then, and we expect China as well as APAC to recover far better from COVID from the global pandemic than other regions that will possibly only see things go back to normal by 2022 from a consumer perspective, but also from a manufacturing perspective as well. So just finally, before I leave the slide on the regional breakdown of the smart home industry, it would be great to talk about the third largest market, Western Europe, where I'm based. It's specifically Western Europe has 17% of the global sales. That's a significant portion of the whole of EMEA. And the Western Europe market is really led by the United Kingdom. That's mainly because a lot of product launches happened there before going on to continental Europe. One of the key reasons for that is a number of the launches are products, American products, and given the voice functionality, a lot of the releases happen in the UK because of the language and then go on to the continent. Now, possibly the slide I enjoy most, referring to the new normal. So how has the industry been impacted by the pandemic, by COVID? So the consumer electronics industry, I remember we were discussing in depth back in February what was going to go on, what was going to happen in the next couple of months. We thought that demand would just shoot down, just like most recessions. You expect consumer demand to go down as purchasing power as purchasing power goes down, but that's not what happened actually. So we've actually seen, well, first of all, I'm going to discuss some of the key trends we've seen across the smart home industry. We've seen the consumer become far more accustomed to their smart home device, especially the voice function, as they've spent more time at home. So they've been using their smart home devices, becoming more accustomed with them, which has been great because usually a consumer will buy an Alexa, put it in their home and might not use it. They might use the voice functionality just to play around with it. So the consumer has become more adept at using their smart home devices. We've also seen the DIY market, the do-it-yourself, and the online market witness significant upticks this year. The do-it-yourself market, that's clear as custom installers have become less popular, as consumers have seen less of a need and a desire to bring in an installer into their homes. The DIY market has become more prevalent. The online market, again, that's kind of obvious as stores, as the mom and pop shops on high streets have shut down. Online demand has increased. We're likely to see online demand this year in 2020 to be higher than next year as some level of normality returns next year. Then looking at the product segments, so how have they been impacted? So you can see, first of all, detectors. So smart detectors, that includes smoke alarms. They've seen a big uptick in sales from what we were expecting. And that's mainly because consumers have found themselves in the home for longer, and so be more conscious of a threat of a fire or smoke. Then we've seen any device linked to home improvements see a small uptick. So that includes lighting. So consumers have spent more on TVs, for example, on their homes, and they've spent less on vacations, on dining out. So we've seen a slight uptick in lighting, for example. On the other hand, we've seen security devices not hit expected sales levels. And that's mainly because the consumer has spent more time at home, meaning they've seen less of a need for a security device because they can monitor their homes. They can monitor potential danger through their own eyes. And the same, quite related, is climate as well. That's related to custom installers, as installation teams have, as the consumer has seen less of a desire to bring in a custom installation team. That's meant that less installations of climate control devices has happened this year. And just to say, from what was just said in the last slide, we do expect sales to return to pre-COVID expectations by 2022. So next year, there'll be some disruption still. We do expect, given the trajectory we're on right now with the vaccinations, actually, I was just listening to the news earlier today that the first public vaccination was given to a 90-year-old British lady. So it's a big day for the world today, and we do expect the rollout of the vaccinations, especially across markets in North America, South America, and Europe, have been significantly impacted by COVID, to start really being rolled out in Q1 next year. Now looking at the barriers to entry for the smart home industry. So what we have is a industry that's growing really healthily, CAGR, compound annual growth rate of 25%. It's been not impacted by the global pandemic as much as other industries, but there still remains a number of barriers to entry for the market. One of the key ones has been the expense of these devices. That's not something that you see too much in China. And just to say that this consumer research that we did is based on data from France, Germany, the UK, and the US. So it's likely that you'll see a big change in opinion from consumers in China, especially with expense. But it's good to compare notes with what's going on in Europe and North America. So expense, that's a big barrier to entry for the consumer. And it's likely to decrease globally as the cost of these devices decrease. So we're expecting security and monitoring devices across the world to reduce by 10% this year. We're expecting compound annual growth rate decrease in the average selling price for security and monitoring device to reduce by 4% year on year for the next 5 years. So a 20% decrease over the next 5 years. So we do expect this variable, this factor, to become less relevant in the coming years. Now, a barrier to entry, which I think is important for any market that you're in, not seeing a use case for these devices. So I think one of the perennial issues of the smart home industry is convincing consumers that there's an actual need for one of these devices. I think the compelling use case of a security device is clear, protecting your family, protecting your friends, an elderly relative. But for a lot of these devices, it's not as clear. And it's what I describe as a vitamin, a nice to have device rather than a painkiller, something that actually directly helps you to heal a pain point of yours. And this is, so apart from security, we're seeing companies try to come up with new use cases for their devices. Convenience, that's one that's quite prevalent in the industry. Comfort, convenience, but we're likely to see a number of use cases come about in the coming years, and I'm going to discuss them in a bit. These are some of the low-hanging fruits that we can expect the industry, that we can expect in the smart home industry in the coming years. Another perennial issue in the industry, this is something that we talk about a lot, is security and privacy. It seems that every month there's a security breach of data here in the UK from a tech company. So this is something that is an issue. It's an issue that consumers still see as the biggest barrier to entry when thinking about purchasing a smart home device. And this is something that hasn't changed in the past couple of years. So we've seen it remain around the 30% mark, as 30% of consumers that we spoke to still see it as an issue. And then the final barrier to entry, that's having a knowledge of these smart home devices. So I think I could probably resonate with this, because before I was in the smart home industry, I really, first of all, didn't know what smart home devices were. And I didn't really understand what the use case was for them. So I think we know that as smart home devices become more popular, as more people buy them and they discuss it with their friends and family, this will become less of an issue. But despite this, I think it's really important to say to vendors and retailers that there needs to be some education process, educating the consumer in the value of these smart home devices and why they should buy a smart device over a dummy device as well. So this is just a sidetrack, and I think a really important slide for anyone who is looking to position their product portfolio this year. This research actually happened before COVID, but actually holds a lot of sway still. We don't expect our research to change so much as we renew the research in the coming months. So the gateway to the smart home industry. We still see smart security devices as one of the key gateways to the smart home industry. So we asked well over 1,000 people across each of these markets, and the consumers being ones that don't own a smart home device, what smart home device they would consider buying in 2020. And 26% they said they would buy a smart security device, and then it's 11% said that they would buy a smart speaker device. So these are clear gateway products into the industry. So if you're completely new to this concept of smart home, you will be looking specifically at smart security or smart speakers. So it's a great way to position your product portfolio. Put the smart speakers there for the newcomers, get them to buy a smart speaker, and maybe next year they'll buy a smart light, a smart plug, etc. And then they grow and they become more accustomed with this ecosystem, smart home ecosystem. Now the fun stuff. So looking at the long-term evolution of the smart home industry. So we're anticipating in the coming years the smart home industry to evolve from a technology perspective. We're expecting a number of different advancements. One of the technological advancements that we expect is that visual platforms will begin being able to enhance our environments. And this is going to be facilitated by the evolution in mixed reality and augmented reality. So an example of this is being able to perceive being in a different environment when you're in your room. So you might be in your living room sitting down, and you might have screens around your walls, and you'll start feeling that you're by the beach, or an example, that's a random example, but you see that starting to happen with Samsung's wall concept and also their QLED TVs. Then from a conversational perspective, so from a voice perspective, we're expecting voice functionality to improve quite a lot in the coming years. At the moment, it's command and control, basically bark at your device and it barks back at you. We're expecting it to become more conversational, more meaningful, and less robotic. And when this happens, we will see consumers, first of all, purchasing more of these devices and then using it more. What's really interesting is the potential use cases that are going to come about when the voice functionality becomes more meaningful and more conversational. I think an example that comes to mind is, for example, therapy or having counseling. It becomes far more meaningful and more humane. And so it's going to be an interesting to see what new use cases come about in the coming years from the voice. And then we expect the advancements in visual and voice to come together and create a more ambient, intelligent user experience. So the idea of this is that we will start perceiving the smart home in a completely different way. It will become more invisible, more immersive, and we'll interact with it far more naturally. Fundamentally, this means the technology working for us, and we will move away from technology literate people like ourselves. We understand these technologies, but not many people do, to people literate technology. So the technology working for us rather than us working for the technology. And again, we've seen elements of this springing up in the industry. We started seeing it actually quite a number of years ago, but the wall concept is just the start of that. But we do expect in the coming 5 to 10 years, the idea of the ambient intelligent user experience gaining more weight, especially across all the random smart home devices that we have. So, key takeaways and expectations for the smart home industry. So going back to what I was discussing before, from a business model perspective, we expect the smart home as a service model to become more prevalent. So we've seen this also happening in smart appliances, what I call as I call home appliances as a service model. And we are seeing it gaining more traction in the smart home industry, and especially across cameras and doorbells. Then we have one of the key reasons why the smart home device will grow rapidly in the coming years. That is because it will become cheaper to buy one of these smart home devices, and we expect it to really hit the mainstream audience in the coming years. So penetration, for example, or saturation of smart security devices across North America will hit 47% by 2024. So over half of Americans will have, of North Americans will have a smart security monitoring device. And then finally, COVID has had some impact on the smart home industry, but will not leave too much of a marker. We expect sales to return to pre-COVID expectations by 2022. Then looking more at the long term, we expect conversational technology to change the way we interact with our smart home devices. It's going to become much more meaningful. And then we expect, with the advancements in mixed reality and augmented reality, that we'll be perceiving our visual environment, the environment around us, very differently in the smart home. And then, as I said previously, with both vision and voice coming together. We expect technology literate people to move to people literate technology. And now just a final little thing that I want to talk about, the new use cases in the industry. So there's clearly a lot of opportunity within the industry still. We expect smart security and monitoring devices again to grow. We expect all different segments to grow, but it is quite difficult for a newcomer to come to the market and expect to gain market share. It's one of the reasons why a rich American man decided to buy a smart security company a few years ago. It wasn't for their technology, it was for market position. And I will not mention names, but it's difficult to acquire market share right now, given where the industry is. Despite this, there will be new use cases emerging in the industry. So assisted living, smart assisted living has been very present in the smart home industry. There are a number of companies doing it, but especially in Europe, it's remained quite traditional and it hasn't been able to break into the mainstream. So we expect advances in assisted living, very much tied to telehealth as well. And then a big area of growth is smart electrical vehicles. So as electrical vehicles become more tied to the grid, we expect electrical vehicles to kind of combine with the smart home as we move from conventional grids to smart grids. And that's going to put a lot of strain on the grids. And so there needs to be dialogue between electrical vehicles manufacturers, but also the smart home, and this will present a lot of opportunities in this area as well. So I think that's me done. As you can probably say, there's a lot happening in this industry, and there are a lot of opportunities, and it's just exciting. That's all I can say, and I'm sure you all know that being part of this industry. So thank you very much, and if you have any questions, please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Julian, for the detailed introduction and the prediction of the market. And now, everybody in this room, we welcome you to ask questions. You can just unmute and ask anything you want. Anyone? No questions?
Hello. Hi, Julian. Can you hear me?
I can, yes.
I wanted to know whether it's going to be more prevalent to use the Bluetooth control devices, for example, through the phone, or is it going to be more prevalent to use them via Alexa and the voice activated devices? What do you think is going to be the trend of how user friendly and how much will people adopt the voice assisted devices?
Yeah, Atul, I'm going to get back to you on that, because we actually have a very wide remit across voice assistants and understanding whether consumers have a preference of using it via smartphones or the Alexa. So I will get back to you on that, because I can quote you the specific figures on that. So if you give me your details afterwards, I can give you an exact quote of the breakdown of that, and also the geography as well, the difference in geography. It's dependent on how prevalent the smart speakers are in a given geography, whether they work in the specific language of the country, and that does impact whether the speaker or the TV or the phone is the device that a consumer will use. I hope that's okay.
Okay, fine. That's fair enough. I'll wait for your analysis on.
Sounds good. If you just send me your email just afterwards, I'll forward you some data.
Okay, will do. Thanks.
Yeah.
Any more questions? Okay, I'll do the final count. If nobody asks more questions, then I guess we will discuss in our next webinar.
Hello, just maybe a small question. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. You were talking about smart living, so I was a bit curious what kind of use cases you see behind, because as I understand, what really makes the solution smart is how all these different devices would integrate and interact together. So it's about the hub and the application and the functionality. So what do you put behind smart living use cases?
When you're referring to smart living, are you talking about smart assisted living? Pascal?
Yeah, yes, could be. I think
Yes. Okay.
the slide was talking about smart living or smart assisted living.
Yeah. At the moment, it involves, it's really an offshoot of smart security. So we call it assisted living, but it's still in its embryonic stages. So monitoring elderly relatives usually. So it's a large segment of it is smart security, and then passive monitoring as well. That's another element of it. I think with COVID this year, also telehealth it has also become more prevalent, but it's still for the most part focused on security and monitoring. So it's going to be interesting to see where the industry goes, how what we already have in the industry can be used, but then also new use cases can be put together to kind of combine to create a wider offering as well.
Yeah, another question from my side. Google and Amazon and others have been working on a thing called chip. What impact do you think that will have on the industry, and is it already in your growth numbers?
I think I got just checking whether I got the second part. Yes, we are predicting that when the chip protocol is rolled out by 2022, there will be an uptick in sales in specific product segments. So we're expecting we factored in that. I think it's too early to say, and I've heard from too many people differing ideas to say how the industry will move forward when chip is about. It'd be amazing to say that chip will become the standard that everyone uses, and we'll hold hands, and there'll just be a one standards protocol that the whole industry can use. But there are benefits to a number of protocols out there, a number of standards, and it's whether chip can offer the perfect platform for all, or whether it can be a significant protocol and then others around it can also work for other vendors' preferences. So I think it's too early to say what will happen. It'll be interesting to see what goes about next year, but we do anticipate when chip is finally rolled out, that the protocol, that there will be an uptick in sales, and it's linked. I wrote about it in my last report, but there's also an impact. We call it the Osborne effect, where certain vendors, such as Google and other large tech companies, are hesitant to roll out product launches before 2022 because they have a fear that the consumer will not want to purchase a device that's not chip enabled, or not it doesn't use the chip protocol. So there's been some fears that quite a lot of launches would be delayed until then. So that's also playing into the fact that we do expect to see an uptick in sales in 2022.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Any more questions? Okay, if there's no more questions, I think now, that's the end of our webinar. We thank everyone to join us today, and we are looking forward to our next one. And thank you very much, Julian, for the detailed discussion. We really appreciate it. We welcome you to join us next time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Cheers. Appreciate it. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.